in order to allow construction to take place directly on the bedrock. The outline of Herodian Jerusalem can be summarized thus. In the east, the city bordered the Kidron Valley, above which was built the huge retaining wall of the Temple Mount compound. The Temple Mount was in fact a huge plaza, in the center of which stood the temple. The courtyard was surrounded by colonnades on all four sides, with the Grand Royal Stowe at its south. 51. At the northwest corner of the compound stood the Antonia fortress. At the Antonia began a wall that surrounded the northern parts of the city. At the foot of western retaining wall of the Temple Mount, the modern western wall, lay the main commercial street of the city. At the southern part of the street stood Robinson's Arch, which bore a large staircase leading from street level to the Royal Stowe. 52. In the southern wall of the mount stood the Huldah Gates, the main entrance to the sacred compound. 53. To their south extended an area of ritual baths serving the pilgrims ascending the mount, and a street leading down to the city of David and the pool of Siloam. West of the compound lay the deep channel of the Teopoion, and beyond it the upper city, residence of the priests on the affluent. The latter was connected to the Temple Mount by a bridge built on what is today known as Wilson's Arch. At the southwestern part of the upper city stood King Herod's palace, and to its north, at the present site of the Tower of David, a citadel with three towers, the Hippocus, the Phasael and the Mariam. It was at this citadel that the walls of Jerusalem met, one surrounding the city from the south and another approaching from the east, and the Temple Mount. Somewhere in the city, possibly in the upper city or to its north, stood the theatre and other Hellenistic institutions. Remains of any of these structures have yet to be found. Herodian city walls. At or about the start of Herod's reign, a second wall was constructed in Jerusalem. This relatively short wall was built to include a new neighborhood which had grown adjacent to the Antonia within the city walls. The second wall runs from north from the Antonia, east to the area where the present Damascus Gate stands, and then south along the eastern bank of the Teopoion to the Garden Gate, near the point at which 4/4 of the old city currently meet. This path excludes the Calvary, Golgotha, where the crucifixion of Jesus took place, as this would have taken place outside the city walls. As much is testified of the New Testament, and he bearing his cross went forth into a place called the place of a skull, which is called in Hebrew Golgotha, for the place where Jesus was crucified was nigh to the city. Gospel of John 19:17, 19:20, 54, Herodian citadels. The three towers of the Herodian citadel. From left to right, the Phasael, Hippocus and Mariam. The Antonia was Jerusalem's main fortress, dominating the Temple Mount and housing the city's garrison. It was built by Herod over the Hasmonean Barriers before 31 BCE and was named after Mark Antony. It shared the same features as the Hellenistic Tetrapeision, although rectangular. In each of its corners stood a tower, one of which way taller than the others. 55. The Herodian citadel stood at the present site of the Tower of David. Herod built the citadel, sometimes referred to as the Tower's citadel, on a hill already fortified in Hasmonean times. Herod built three towers at the site, naming them Hippocus, Phasael and Mariam, after his friend, brother and wife. It was at the Hippocus that the first wall, approaching from the south, turns east towards the Temple Mount, and also where the third wall, constructed in the mid-1st century CE, would meet the first wall. Josephus provides a detailed description of the towers in the 5th book of his Velum Judaicum, commenting these were for largeness, beauty, and strength beyond all that were in the habitable earth. Josephus, The Jewish War v. 156.56, all three towers were square. The Hippocus Tower was 13 meters wide at its base and 40 meters high. Its lower half was solid, above which stood a water reservoir, and above this a two-storied palace. The tower was crowned with battlements and turrets. The Faisal Tower was 20 meters wide and also featured a 20 meters high solid base. This was topped by a peristyle surrounded by bulwarks, above which stood another smaller tower containing several rooms and a bathhouse and topped with battlements. Josephus remarked that this tower wanted nothing that might make it appear to be a royal palace. 56. The third tower, the Mariam, was similar to the other two in that it had a solar base, and also featured a second decorated story. The base of only one tower survives, identified as either the Hippocus or the Faisal. 57. North of the citadel stood the tower's pool, another water storage facility which may have been hewn during the Hasmonean period. Herod's palace. South of the Herodian citadel stood the king's palace, which exceeds in the ability to describe it. 58. Nevertheless, Josephus does provide a detailed description of grandeur and luxury of Herod's residence. The magnificent halls decorated in gems, silver and gold, the ceilings made of decorated wooden beams, with enough beds to house 100 guests. It was dotted with open courts and colonnades. There were, moreover, several groves of trees, and long walks through them, with deep canals and cisterns, that in several parts were filled with brazen statues, through which the water ran out. There were withal many dovecotes of tame pigeons about the canals. Josephus, the Jewish War v. 172. 58. Josephus laments the destruction of the palace, not at the hands of the Romans which later sacked the city, but by warring parties from within. 58. No remains of the palace have been positively identified, though excavations in the Armenian quarter, south of the Tower of David, have unearthed a system of massive retaining walls thought to belong to the Herodian structure. Temple Mount. The temple built upon the end of the Babylonian captivity was a modest one, small and simple. Herod, seeking to ingratiate himself with his subjects and to glorify his own name, massively expanded both the temple and very mount on which it stood. Under Herod, the area of the Temple Mount doubled in size. 59, 60, 61. The temple was the masterpiece of Herod's massive building enterprise, built of white and green marble and perhaps even blue marble used to portray waves. 45. The building was continuously improved, even after Herod's death and up to its very destruction in 70 CE. 62. Unlike the earlier structures which stood at the site, there are in fact many archaeological finds, including inscriptions, supporting Josephus' account of Herod's temple. 63. Herod expanded the temple courtyard south, where he built the royal stove, a basilica used for commercial purposes, similar to other forums of ancient world. 51. Other structures. The upper city was the name given to neighborhoods constructed on the hill currently referred to as Mount Zion, particularly those parts which reside inside the city's medieval walls, beneath today's Jewish and Armenian quarters. It is higher in altitude than the city of David and the Temple Mount. During Herod's temple reconstruction of Robinson's Arch reign, this was the residence of the priestly class as well as the affluent and overlooked the temple. It was connected to the temple compound via a large bridge, the sole remains of which can be seen in Wilson's Arch, next to the western wall. The Herodian Street was Jerusalem's main artery, stretching north from the Pool of Siloam, under Robinson's Arch, along the western wall, and under Wilson's Arch. 64. Archaeological excavations alongside the western wall have revealed that the street terminated at a square near the Antonia, though there are visible remains, such as pre-prepared paving stones, indicating that the street was not yet complete. The street was built over a drainage system constructed of large and beautifully dressed white stones. 64. From the Pool of Siloam the street climbed up moderate steps that led up to today's Western Wall Plaza. Various shops and stores were situated along its central portion, at the foot of the Temple Mount, along today's Western Wall. 65. Among these were likely shops where sacrificial animals could be bought, as well as exchanges allowing pilgrims to exchange currency and provide them with the half-shekel ritual tax each Jew was annually obliged to pay for temple maintenance. At the southwestern corner of the Temple Mount stood the street's most important junction. From there it was possible to turn east towards the Huldah Gates, north, up the street, or to ascend Robinson's Arch to the Royal Stowe. 52. Several remains of the street can still be seen in several places, at the Pool of Siloam, in the Western Wall tunnels, and at the Jerusalem Archaeological Park at the foot of the Temple Mount. The latter features sections of the street buried by the collapse of Robinson Arch at the time of the Roman sacking of Jerusalem. Although ancient sources describe Herodian Jerusalem's Hellenistic institutions such as the theatre, any remains of these have yet to be found. These were most likely built on the plain north of the upper city. Michael Avi Iona placed a theatre in the upper city itself, near the palace of Herod. Archaeologist Joseph Patridge has suggested that the Herodian theatre in Jerusalem was made of wood, as was customary at Rome at the time, which may explain the lack of finds. Herodian waterworks. The aqueduct, a method of conveying water to the city, was an integral part of Roman city planning. Already quite large, Jerusalem needed to satisfy the needs of countless pilgrims annually, requiring much more water than was available. Water was taken from Einatam and Solomon's pools, about 20 kilometers south of Jerusalem crow flies and about 30 meters higher in altitude than the Temple Mount. Like its Hasmonean predecessor, the aqueduct took a sinuous route in order to bypass ridges lying in its path, although at two locations it was carved as a tunnel, a 400 meters long section under Bethlehem and a 370 meters section under Jabal Mukaba. At Rachel's tomb the aqueduct split into two, a lower aqueduct running to the Temple Mount and an upper aqueduct leading to the pool near the Herodian citadel. Until recently the upper aqueduct was thought to have been constructed 200 years after Herod's reign, the work of Legio Ex Fretensis which resided in Jerusalem. Recent studies, however, indicate that the Legion only renovated the aqueduct which had been partially destroyed. Roman prefects, procurators, and the destruction of the temple. Jerusalem at the end of the Second Temple period after Herod's death in 4 BCE and a brief period of rule under Herod Archelaus as a tetrarchy, Judea was made into a Roman province called Judea in 6 CE, which was first governed by prefects till 41, then briefly by Agrippa, and after 44 by procurators. Political state under the prefects. The Roman prefects of Judea were equestrians assigned to that position without any connection to the land or concern for its populace. Their rule was subsequently characterized by an increased tax burden undermining an already delicate political situation. This was further exacerbated after 44 CE with the appointment of Greek procurators who were deemed hostile to Judaism. These are supposed to have given a higher priority to making personal gain over the general well-being of their subjects. Contemporaneous literature describes the period as one of anarchy, agitation and violence, with government activity reduced to mere tax collection. Jewish indignation at Roman rule eventually led to the First Jewish-Roman War. This period nevertheless featured a short period of nominal independence during the reign of King Agrippa, between 41–44 CE, 66, which in a sense saw the restoration of the Herodian dynasty, though there is no indication that the status as Roman province was even temporarily dissolved. Social and religious state. Under the Roman prefects the tensions between various Jewish parties, diminished by their joint hatred of Herod, resurfaced as both groups became entrenched in their opposing world views. The Sadducees accepted Roman rule as long as the rituals of the temple and the status of the priests went undisturbed. These, along with the aristocratic, wealthy and affluent, enjoyed the benefits of Roman rule and its protection. The moderate Pharisees, representing the majority of the population, were resentful of the Jewish loss of independence, yet averse to open rebellion which would arouse the wrath of the Roman authorities, burden the population and likely put it in grave danger. As long as Torah scholarship was allowed to continue and the Sanhedrin